going to do it acoustic.
Great.
I mean, at the end of the, that's a great scene at the end where you're holding the cover.
Right.
But I know that you've since found the album.
I did get it,
And you paid quite a lot.
I paid a lot for it, yeah. Actually, it's stupid. I've never ever paid more than £200 for a record anyway. So it's not like, Northern Soul guys, they go really stupid. But I went stupid, I paid £2,000. Actually, my wife doesn't know that.
She will now. But even better than that is, last time I spoke to you, you couldn't actually find the record.
Yeah, I found it.
Oh, you found it?
Yeah, I found it.
Oh.
Yeah, it was there. It's sort of that classic where you kind of put something away because you don't want to lose it, so you really forget where you put it. That classic sort of.
Yeah, why is it important? Because that album has since been reissued by Trump.
Yeah.
And just sold out.
Weirdly enough, they did that. The thing was, Johnny Trunk, who lives up the road from me in Stoke Newington, in London, he found out about the record through me and Ed Motter, and so what he did, he was really clever, and he realised it was public domain, that therefore the record wasn't owned by anybody anymore, so it was like free to be, you could do what you want with it. So, because I tried to get Universal to find the master tapes, but they went years ago. So what he did cleverly is he basically got hold of Ed Motter. Ed Motter transferred his copy and gave for like 500 quid or something, and gave Johnny Johnny hasn't even got the record, and sent him the part the recording, and then he just went and pressed it up, right, for nothing, just redid the thing. Now, I've spent like a year on this project, right, working it out, sold fuck all, right? And meanwhile, he's actually sold loads of the Tam Tam Tam.
It's almost sold out.
I think he's repressed it 3 times.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But I mean, I'm happy for him.
Try and explain to somebody who maybe doesn't collect vinyl why it's important to have that original pressing.
Well, I mean, it isn't really that important. I mean, for me it's important because it's just because I'm an idiot. At the end of the day, a record's a record, it sounds great, whatever, and he's done a pretty good job actually. Not an amazing job, could have been better, but actually this record, for me, it was such an important record because of what I do, and where it fits into the sort of musical line of Brazilian music and the stories behind it, and it was just one of those things I had to get, and actually it's only the beginning of the story because that record was made in 1957, and what it was a record that was basically made, I didn't realise this, it was a record that was made to be a kind of cultural promotion for Brazil. So it was, and this record was just was part of a theatre play. So the Brazilian tourist board, they put together a theatre play with dancers and a band and everything, and they toured all around the world. And the music of that theatre was this album Tam Tam Tam. So my dream is to actually recreate the theatre. So in the next year or so, one of the things I really want to do, a little bit, I don't know if you saw the Fella play, they did the Fella on Broadway thing. And this is, so my thing, and just to add to that, there's a really good musician in LA, what's his name again, Camargo, he's a guitarist. And he won a Grammy and stuff, and he heard the record, and he's actually started remaking the whole, so he's replaying it all in LA. And then I've been working on a kind of DJ electronic version of the album. So anyway, to answer the question of this, it's just the beginning of the journey with Tam Tam Tam, because the whole thing is, I think there's so much more. So hopefully in a year's time, we'll be here at the Sydney Opera House with the full schmoodle.
There's not much info on them. I mean, if you go searching, do you know whether there are other albums?
Yeah, there is, yeah. I've got a couple of other records that he made in Europe. So he did a couple of records that came out in Germany, actually. And I've got the 10-inch, an album called Brasiliana, which actually Ed Motter gave me, which is like precursor to that, which is a beautiful green sleeve 10-inch. It's not as good musically, but it's really interesting because it's kind of just built. It's the thing about that is that, I mean, I don't know if I say it in the film, I can't remember, but the weird thing is, there's a song, on that song is the original Mashkanada, right? And it wasn't until Ed Motta was on, he does a little bit of TV in Brazil, so because he's really known to be a great wine maker, a wine critic, and a comic collector, and he's also really expert on tea. And on records, and so he gets invited to rich people's houses just to chat, because he's a raconteur of the highest degree, as you can see, and he plays incredible. And anyway, he was on a television show in Brazil, and he basically was talking about the Tam Tam Tam, and he said, do you know that this is the original version of Mashkanada, and played it, and no one knew that. So Jorge Ben, who wrote that, apparently, right, he has been taking all the coinage, all the publishing, for years and years and years on Mashkanada, but actually he didn't write it. So that was a big thing, because it's kind of like the unofficial anthem of Brazil in a way. The funny thing about all of that is that Jorge Ben, Rod Stewart, this is a funny connection, right? Rod Stewart was in Brazil in the 70s, getting ready to make an album, and at Carnival, the sort of theme of Carnival that year was a song called Taj Mahal by Jorge Ben, which goes right? And a few months later, Rod Stewart's back in Scotland, right? And he's making his album, and guess what he writes? He writes a song called Do You Think I'm Sexy, which was a huge hit. And so Jorge Ben sued Rod and got all the money for that song. So all that money goes back. So really, Jorge Ben, Rod did to Jorge what Jorge did to Jose Pratas.
Jose's not around anymore, right?
His daughter's around, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did you know that he moved to Sydney?
Who?
Jose Pratas.
No.
Yeah, he worked at a Latin dance school in Glebe. I think you told me about the album. I was like, yeah, because I could not find any information on this guy. I was searching for it, and then some Latin dance school in Glebe going, oh yeah, Jose Pratas worked here before he died. No way.
Before he died here?
He actually moved in 62, when he was 62 years old, here. He founded, he pretty much spread over salsa all over Sydney. He founded a school, a salsa school in Avalon, Northern Beaches.
Salsa or samba? Salsa?
Salsa. Yeah. Salsa school, because at the time salsa was more famous than, samba here. And he died here in 2004. You gotta speak to Beatriz Wagner from SBS. She got like archives, and I made a book.
Good shit.
Joel's going to take you back to like, you're 16. You're playing pretty far up Brazilian records in a pub in London.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on there? Like, how did that really come about? And what were the people thinking? Like,
I don't know.
Is this the height of post-punk?
Yeah, I grew up sort of in London, and it was, you had to make a choice. I mean, the funny thing was, I grew up, I'm French, so I went to French school until I was 10. French lycée in London, and then my mum and dad took me out. Weirdly enough, I don't know why they did that. Actually, I haven't asked them. But they took me out of French school. Maybe it was too expensive, and they put me in the local English comprehensive and grammar. Actually, I had to pass my A-level class. And but when I went to this boys' school, rugby playing school, I immediately realised that I had to belong to some sort of tribe. I was either going to be a mod or a skinhead or a punk. But there was 3 soul boys, and that was the music I liked. So I basically became a soul boy. And so from the age of sort of 13, I found my identity in a way, because you had to do that. That wasn't the same for French schools. So, and from that point onwards, my mate, his sister had a good record collection, and so I'd go around there, and that's where I heard Earth, Wind and Fire, and Bobby Caldwell records, and that sort of stuff. And so I was really into soul and jazz funk. And then I started sort of sneaking back to pubs where there'd be DJs playing, and it was just, I felt, you'd go to K-Star, Soul Weekenders and all that sort of stuff. And it was really by going to those places that I discovered the back room. There was always a back room, So in the main room they'd be sort of chucking foam at each other and throwing beer and doing sort of pyramid dances, which was really good fun. but I was like, and then my mates just said, look, there's a little thing, there's a guy called Bob Jones playing in the back room, you know, in these sort of horrendous holiday camps in Suffolk, and ready to go. And there you go in there, and he'd be playing like mad Brazilian batucadas and Art Blakey drum solos and stuff, and all the guys and girls who were in there were dancing really well, and it was just really exciting, and it felt like something. So that was really when I bought that thing. I kind of became totally obsessed by that music. And then, you know, when I got my decks at 14, 15, I just started, you know, listening to pirate radio, Radio Victor, and the odd station that might have the odd jazz funk show on, you know. And this is punk, you know, so it's like John Peel on one side playing, you know, The Clash, and then on the other side it was Robbie Vincent or Radio Victor playing Japanese jazz funk imports and stuff, and I was like, wicked, you know, and they all wear good clothes, and the girls were much better looking in the jazz funk scene. So that was the thing, and so inevitably I ended up playing that sort of music in pubs, and it was part of a movement, you know. It's like Northern Soul. It doesn't get the props, you know. Northern Soul is like hype and everything, and Northern Soul was good, and it has a lot of, you know, aesthetically pleasing things. But the jazz scene, the jazz dance scene, was like even one step further deeper, really. So, so yeah, it was good.
Yeah, and then by 1988 you started the club at Dingwalls.
Oh yeah, quite a few years later. Yeah. There was quite a few things before then, but yeah, 1988 was like, you know, it was acid house. So that was a very, very big moment for us all as DJs. I mean, up until '88, you know, it was just a hobby for everyone. I mean, you know, it wasn't what it is like, you know. I mean, I'm here for the electronic music conference in Sydney, you know. I mean, that stuff wasn't happening in 1988 at all, was it? Yeah. But acid house was a really big factor to that, and you know, going to Ibiza. I mean, I was going to Ibiza every year with Nicky Holloway and Danny Ramplin and Paul Oakenfold, but I just used to DJ in the background. I was the weird one playing all the stuff and smoking beer. They were drinking beer, and then they took ecstasy. And I didn't. And they did acid house, and I did acid jazz.
What's your memory that first starting that club? Because it wasn't an instant hit, but pretty
Dingwalls?
much, yeah.
It was just brilliant. I mean, Dingwalls. I did it last week. I mean, we do it once every year now. We do this. I'm not into reunions at all. I hate it. I don't hate it, but I'm sort of a little bit. I still try and stay in the now, but actually, Dingwalls is this incredible thing, and apparently they're knocking the venue down. Finally, they're knocking it down next year. Yeah. But anyway, let's not get too depressed about it. But yeah, so it's just great just to be able to be at that point in club culture history, where, you know, I'd done my gigs. I was still DJing everywhere, and in the West End, at the WAG Club, and all these places, and all the soul boy things. The soul, you know, the scene, which went. There's Weekenders, and Nicky Holloway did a thing, Special Branch, very important part of British club culture. But when Dingwalls came along, I was on the BBC, I had a show on the Radio London, and they said the only way you can have a show, because it was a bit weird about payment, they just said you've got to have your own club, you've got to, you know, and that's where you're going to pay. It was really mad. And so they found me, Dave Pearce, who's a pretty poor DJ these days, but lovely guy, but, you know, he actually, I owe him one, because he basically said, oh yeah, you should go and play at Dingwalls. So I went in Dingwalls and made 50 quid, which paid for my radio show indirectly, and then we just carried on doing it, and we just hit on this really good period in London, club culture moment. You know, because the thing is, at the time, going to clubs in London, you know, there was a really heavy door policies, it was quite racist, it was a lot of violence, you know, so suddenly going, it's a different period, it was 80s, and so suddenly going to Dingwalls on a Sunday afternoon in Camden Market, which at the time was the equivalent of sort of Hipstersville, you know, it was like Bethnal Green is now. No one goes to Camden these days, apart from sort of Italian tourists and stuff on a quick, you know, whatever, but you know, on a cheap one, but yeah, back then it was a cool place. So. And it was open. There was no door stress, and what was great about it is that it was a place where we could really create the sort of ideology of what the scene was, which was about championing and celebrating heritage music. So we'd always have live bands. So people like Pharaoh Sanders used to come down when they were at Ronnie's, or we had Aeto, Flora, you know, Roy Ayers, all those people. They all come and played. And then we also had the DJ culture, so the whole thing was the two things together. And it happened at the same time as acid house, so you get all the ravers going out on the night before to all day, M25 parties, and they'd be like, "Where are we going to go now?" "Oh yeah, Dingwalls." So we get that lot in as well, which made it brilliant. We get the dancers, we get the sort of acid Teds, I think that's what the term was at the time, and then sort of the jazzy cultural lot. So it was really fun. And a lot of international people, so you get, because of the talk market, and a lot of those people actually went in there and then took the concept and took it around the world. So that's when the scene kind of grew globally, I think.
Yeah. Can't go sort of past Dingwalls without mentioning Mark Murphy, because he passed away this year, and what an amazing track that is.
Yeah,
when did you find out about that tune, and did you know it was coming? Did he?
Well, I'd say Mark Murphy, my biggest regret, Mark Murphy is a jazz singer who was just amazing, right? And when I was 18, 19, I was working my first radio show on the BBC. Why they got me on there, I've got no idea, because I was on pirate radios until then. But anyway, I got the gig, and I did a show called Mad on Jazz, and I knew nothing about jazz apart from the records I'd stolen from Sutton Library, and a few jazz Funk Level 42 kind of rip-off tracks and stuff. So I basically, but I was on the radio, and it was great. And in the first month of being on that radio station, I was invited to interview 3 people who were in town. So you've got to remember, I'm this sort of 18-year-old boy who's, the best restaurant I've been to is like, I don't know, like the American, burger joints. I had no culture at all in my head at all. And the first sort of 3 people I met and interviewed was Wayne Shorter was one person, and he hung around for 2 hours and chatted to me about Buddhism and everything, which was brilliant, but I didn't understand at the time. The other person was Jalal from The Last Poets, which was like the civil rights sort of hardcore black consciousness band. I was like, fucking hell. Young white boy like doing that. And then the other one was the other third person I met in that period of time was Mark Murphy, who was this gay jazz vocalist who'd always been slightly on the outskirts of jazz because of his sexuality and because of how he did it, but he was regarded as the greatest scatter and vocal artist of his generation. And so that little period for me was really important because I kind of got all elements of what is jazz music. And throughout the whole of my sort of first 10, 15 years of doing what I did as a DJ, Mark Murphy was always part of that story. So whenever he'd come to London, he'd come to the parties, he'd come and hang out, and he'd just see it. And so he wrote this one song called Dingwalls, which is like a 2-minute sort of poem over a real fast jazz beat, where he kind of talks about a week in the life of being following me as a DJ, and it ends up him arriving at Dingwalls, and it is probably the best thing I've ever had written to do with me.
So fantastic.
And he played at Dingwalls many times, but he passed away. And my big regret actually is, by the way, I haven't had any coffee. It feels like I'm really I'm just a bit on the jet lag one. But yeah, no, the thing is with Mark Murphy is that my big regret is I didn't interview him at the end, because I really knew he was very ill for a long time, and he was living in Boston. And one of my sort of big ambitions was to go and spend some time with him, just to kind of really capture his story. Because one of my ambitions at the moment is just to be able to find those musicians who aren't really in the first line of being big, sort of important, well-known names. But they've got even better stories to tell, a lot of that lot, and so and that generation is going. So I think it's important to spend time with them.
Yeah, he was just an incredible vocalist, wasn't he? Every note, it just seemed like he was thinking about it 10 minutes before, like what note am I going to hit? He's just
yeah.
And
he was just a little bit decadent. That's what's cool about him. He's just a bit off,
and a bit sort of Vegas or something as well.
Yeah.
Low and sitting on the stool. There's something about him. Then you can leap forward a little bit. You start Acid Jazz Records with Eddie Pillar. Are you guys still talking? Like, what's the story there? Because he seems to sort of crop up every once in a while with a whole bunch of acid jazz reissues.
Yeah, I mean, the whole acid jazz thing for me was, it was Rob and me who came up with it, really, and Chris Bangs, and Eddie just knew how to press records, and we put out a couple of records. I paid for everything, and for years, and then after 6 months, I didn't really want to be part of the mod scene, because in a way, it was kind of like, for me, acid jazz was mental. It was like, getting high, listening to acid house and Albert Ayler records. That was what acid jazz was. It was not meant to be organ trios playing
Yeah.
revival music, you know.
Yeah.
So after, as much as I like Jimmy Smith, you know, I'll probably play something tonight. But yeah, no, acid jazz was just, it was a shame, you know, we weren't ready for that, and to really have, to make something more politically resonant with what we had at that moment, you know. I think that, you know, we all get a moment in time in music, and acid jazz actually was a very strong scene. But it didn't really have a focused ideology, you know, and I think it let. I remember speaking to Jerry Dammers about it, and members of the Clash, and later, years later. And they were all like, yeah, we were really excited when it sort of popped up, you know, because it looked like it was going to be a sort of really interesting, subversive part of club culture with a bit more of a political edge rather than just decadent. But it didn't really deliver, did it? And I was like, yeah, I know. I mean, the only band that delivered for me properly on that level was Galliano, in a way. And then I kind of just felt that I wanted to be more about representing British club culture, which was more about, you know, groups like the Young Disciples and electronic music, which was growing, like drum and bass and Full Hero and Ronnie Size. So that I felt much more comfortable in that area than just in the small sort of, you know, what acid jazz had become.
Yeah.
So, but I'm proud of it.
Yeah. And I mean, just talking Galliano, Rob, you're here with Rob Gallagher.
Yeah.
What's the? I mean, you've been sort of inseparable for quite a while.
Yeah, he's in the film, isn't he? Yeah, he's in the film. Yeah, he's
what's
around.
the connection for you? What makes it work? What makes the partnership work?
Well,
yeah.
Well, you know what? He doesn't want to be a DJ, and I think that actually, you know, we get on really well because he doesn't want to be me. I don't want to be him. and he's inspiring. You know, he's an incredible songwriter and thinker, and yeah, good man. He's actually in his bedroom right now because he's not feeling very well. But he'll be at the party later. But yeah.
I'm going to open up for questions. Has anyone got a question they'd like to ask Giles? Throw your hand up.
Throw your hand
Come on.
Yeah.
Hey, is that the bridge then for you? Because you're not a muso, or you don't play an instrument, or you don't know how to write music. So is that relationship
with Rob?
With Rob, is like, does that help bridge it? So
Yeah.
I mean, obviously in Brazil you have the language issue.
Yeah.
But then you're in the studio and you're trying to say, you know, this is what I want, and then you sort of translate it, I guess, to him because you're good mates and you can.
Yeah, but also to Cassine. Cassine was really critical here because Cassine kind of gets me and where I'm coming from. So he'd been to see me play in Tokyo and stuff when he was out there and I was DJing, and so he was the key for this record. In fact, we're just making another record at the moment, which is not the Tam Tam Tam, but we've been out in Rio recently to do some new stuff, which is going to be much more low-key and electronic. So we're not going for the sort of revival, let's get the legends out type of concept. This is more free, but yeah, no, it is interesting. And I've had to kind of learn to find that role as a producer. I don't think Diplo, we were talking about Diplo earlier on, I don't think he plays an instrument. I think a lot of DJ producers don't play. But the key is really how you can communicate with your engineer and so whether it was when I was in Cuba, the first album I did over there with Roberto Fonseca was really important for me because he was such a great understander of what I wanted, and that is the key. I just did a record actually, a new film which we premiered last week in London on rumba. So I went out in Cuba in June and spent like a month just sort of searching for the reality of what rumba is, you know.
Rumba, right? Yeah.
Rumba, yeah, rumba, yeah. I keep saying that wrong in the documentary.
Like rumba.
Yeah.
Has anyone else got a question for Giles?
Yeah, obviously you recorded albums in Cuba and Brazil. Do you have a prediction on what the next big thing might be? I know you're into African music and music from all around the globe, but is there a particular region that you haven't discovered or haven't, been over to?
Well, the place that
Beyond?
fascinates me a lot, and I don't think many people have done that much with it, apart from inspiring people like Terry Ryder and Steve Reich, is the gamelan thing in Indonesia. I think that's really interesting.
There as well.
Sorry?
Were you were DJing there as well?
I was there, yeah, and every time I go there, I'm always like looking to see, you know, and apparently I've got some music that I found from some new musicians, gamelan people. I don't know if it's something I'd want to go and do, but I think it's something very fascinating. I think it's an area of music that I think fits beautifully with jazz anyway, and so that's something that I find, you know.
Cool.
My God, I had a great time in Thailand the other day.
Yeah, well that's kind of why I was asking.
The music
There's
out
some
there
stuff
is
coming out of there.
unreal, all that stuff. Molam and stuff. There's a good scene.
Yeah, I think last time I spoke to you, I asked you what your sort of first love is musically. I was expecting you to say jazz or maybe Latin or whatever, and you said to me the music that's coming out of London, which was a great answer, but I think it's obviously about the place.
Yeah.
What is it about London, do you think, that makes it so?
London is constantly reinventing itself, and it's so many people are just in that. It's so competitive, and it's just if you're doing what I do, the bit of me which is like on the radio and travelling around the world as a sort of musical ambassador in a way. I mean, London is just everything. Pretty much comes out of London, I think, or the UK. I mean, there's a great scene in Australia now, which is brilliant, and I'm really fascinated by, you know, how that's going. But for me, London is untouchable as a, you know, as a place of just movement and reinvention and history. So, and I think it's the climate. You know, I've tried to work it out, but I think that, you know, people are just, that's, you know, you go to the beach.
I think we've got time for one more question. Giles has got to eat dinner and then get to Oxford Art Factory, so up the back to you.
Awesome. At the beginning of the documentary, one of the female singers said a statement. She said, music is the soul of a culture, which I love that statement. But I work as an archaeologist, and I'm just wondering, for you, who's somebody who collects so much vinyl, do you think that vinyl is a very tangible source of capturing the soul of a culture for future generations, for future people, so that we can look back and go, hey, thanks, Giles.
Wow. Whoa. Spun me out there.
You haven't eaten dinner, remember?
No. Whoa. Come back to you on that one.
That's fine, look at you.
I want to then ask, what about How Come Sudden Freeze? I remember seeing it on top of the pop Thursday. Remember when it dropped, it was crazy.
Yeah.
I love the tune.
Well, that was just a classic moment of, you know, because again, this record, we made it in like under a week, I think, you know, so it's not a record that, it was, everything was a lot, you know, we had to deliver. And it was literally a chat with Cassim, the guy, the producer over there, and in the cafe just before at lunchtime. And I said, oh yeah, have you heard the song called Southern Freeze? And he goes, because I suddenly thought that might be nice in Portuguese, because I love the song. And so we just got it out on YouTube, you know, as you can do, played it, and he just got his little drum machine out and literally did a little pattern, and then we got the singer in, and that was it. That's how quick it happened. It literally, that was a real moment of like idea, arrangement, get the singer in, translate the vocals. Oh, she sings it in English, and yeah, I've always loved that song.
Stand out.
Can I just ask about that sort of contemporary electronic, you know, musician that's featured there? Like, he was amazing. Like,
Yeah.
What's happened with him in the last couple of years?
I don't know actually. I was finding that because I was out there a few weeks ago, and I think he's moved to Europe for a bit, and but he hasn't put anything out yet.
Okay.
So yeah, but I'm sure it'll come soon.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Latinese.
Credits. We'll post it
Latinese
online.
something.
Yeah. Yeah, come back.
Giles,
Cheers, guys.
thanks for being so generous with your time.
Okay, yeah, lovely.
Put your hands together.